Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2 of environmental ethics. This week we're going to be examining various aspects of environmental ethics, and some of the theoretical aspects include the difference between wilderness, nature, and then non-wild or non-natural environments. On the practical side, so in ethics, there's the theoretical component, which is like the underlying ideas and like philosophical positions that people have in relation to these topics. And then when we say practical side, what we mean is when we apply the theoretical components or the philosophy to real-world applications or real-world scenarios. And so this week, one of the practical applications is going to be in relation to mountaintop removal in order to extract coal that we use in our society and most countries use as the primary producer of electricity. So when you see something that says like, oh yeah, you can use electricity, for example, like a hybrid or like a electric powered car. If you really want to go green, then you should use electricity generated by solar panels or like geothermal energy or something like that, because if you use electricity that's generated by burning of coal, then you're kind of negating the effects that you're having by not burning gasoline, right? Because if you charge your batteries using electricity, but then that electricity was produced by burning coal, then ultimately you're still utilizing you're still producing greenhouse gas by driving your electric car. But anyway, this week we're focusing on mountaintop removal, but also I've included issues like fracking, which is hydraulic fracturing, which is a method that's used to extract oil and natural gas from reservoirs around the world now, actually. And many of you have probably seen videos of people lighting their tap water on fire. Well, really what they're doing is they're lighting the methane that's coming out of their faucets on fire, but so the water's coming out and they like take a lighter and they light it and boom, a big flame will pop out. So anyway, the theoretical will be focused on wilderness and nature and what it means to have wild spaces, and then the practical application is the mountaintop removal and fracking, because ultimately in mountaintop removal, these coal mining companies are literally removing mountains. So, in the Appalachian Mountains, there'll be a mountain and then it will be removed, or the top of it, the mountain top will be removed. But ultimately, they'll go down as far as they need to in order to get access to the coal, ultimately leaving in the place of a mountain something else, like a small hill or maybe even just flat land. When it comes to wilderness and the relationship between nature and non-natural spaces, there's an extensive literature on what constitutes something as being wild or what constitutes something as being natural. So many of us probably think that wild places are places like the Grand Canyon or some of the like Yellowstone or these national areas that have been set aside because they're ultimately wild and pristine and free from the harm that humans can cause to those places. Even though, of course, there are roads that have been built through these spaces and things like wildfires have been prevented in these areas. And so natural occurrences don't occur because humans are inhabiting those places, or at least going to those places to have an experience of the wild. But if you think about what's natural and what's wild, and you think about it from a philosophical standpoint, problems arise. Why is it that I have to drive to a place that's uninhabited in order for it to be wild? Can a city be wild? Can the nature of a city be wild? Can a suburb be wild? Could there be wilderness in a space that is totally overrun by human artifacts, human production, roads, buildings, and all these things? And if you think more about it, like, can you find the wild within urban spaces? And I think most people would say, yes, there are these wild spaces, and For example, nature often acts within urban environments and demonstrates its wildness, right? So an earthquake, could happen in a city anywhere, and all of a sudden people are confronted with the wilderness or the danger of the natural. Even a dog, right? A domesticated dog. So we've attempted to breed the wildness out of the dog. All of a sudden attacks a child or something, right? So it exhibits kind of like this more instinctual, wild, violent tendency. But it's not merely violent tendencies. For example, there's this famous beach close to where I live called Seal Beach, and it was originally constructed to be a children's beach. So this guy left money after he died, I believe it was a man, to build this break wall so that the waves would hit the break wall, and then behind the break wall would be this nice beach where children could play in the water, free from the dangers of like rip currents and perhaps some sort of organisms that could attack. I mean, sharks don't regularly attack that close to shore, and so ultimately he built this beach for children. And what happened? Well, the seals came in, right? Because this place is great. It's shielded. It has this great little lagoon area where they can teach their babies how to hunt for fish and how to swim and how to navigate the currents and things, but it's very safe. So now on a yearly basis, the seals show up. Well, they kind of hang out there year round, and then they give birth to their pups in this place that's supposed to be made for a children's beach. And of course the humans are battling it out, right? So some people think that the beach should be open to humans, and then others want to protect this kind of sanctuary for the seals. And so actually all the tourists show up, and what you have is these people at the top of the little beach screaming at each other, right? So the people who want to protect the seals with a megaphone will say, "Stay away from the seals, please, please stay away." And then the other people on the other side will say, "Stop harassing tourists. It's okay to be close to the seals. They like humans," right? And so the humans, of course, are battling. It's totally a California problem, right? The humans are battling it out over this wild, natural. Is it wild? Has it become wild since the seals have come in? So anyway, humans do their best to create certain things, and then sometimes nature and the wild take over those spaces. So this week, I want you to reflect on what makes something wild versus what makes something domestic or domesticated. Also reflect on what makes something natural versus non-natural. Often there's this idea that anything that's created by a human is non-natural. So roads are not natural, cars are not natural, computers are not natural, and so the human kind of stands outside of nature. But if it's natural for humans to be creative, if it's natural for humans to take resources and then put those resources in relation to each other to create new things, then a computer is absolutely natural. It springs from the natural human desire to create using elements that the human finds on Earth. So why would it be any less natural for a hunter-gatherer society to create an arrow than it would be for somebody in a more developed society to create a computer? Or why is a walking stick more natural than a video camera, right? And so you can see how these things, you get into dangerous areas when you try to, well, not dangerous, but difficult areas when you try to define the natural from the unnatural and the wild from the non-wild. And one last story before I go that exemplifies this. So I like to surf, as I mentioned, and one night it was dark, and most people don't surf in the dark, so but I went down to where there's this really large building with these lights that shine down onto the beach and the water so that I could still see the break, so I could catch some waves. And so I'm in this like non-natural, unwild environment because it's being lit by these huge floodlights that are on top of this hotel. Everybody's mad about the hotel because it's too tall. It blocks the view, blah, blah, blah. Again, California problems, right? And so I'm enjoying myself, catching these little waves. And I was pretty close to shore. So I'm in this like kind of natural, not very wild environment, seems very safe. And I catch a good wave, and I jump off my board, and all of a sudden I jump into basically what appears to be like a forest of kelp. of sea kelp. But it was the thickest that I've ever encountered in this area. And so I'm immediately underwater, like kind of surrounded by these like tentacles, kelp tentacles kind of, right? And I'm like, okay, well, this is okay. I think I should be okay. So I start to try to swim out, but my hands are hitting these kelp strings, right? And so then I start to like get a little bit nervous. So I'm like trying to get to the surface. So I get to the surface and I'm like, and I see that there's another big wave coming and I'm in bad shape. So I try to turn my board around, and when I pull it, I realize that the leash of my board, the thing connecting my ankle to the board, is just covered by hundreds of these tentacles of kelp, right? So literally probably hundreds of pounds of kelp. So if I tried to pull the board up or to stand up, it would be impossible because of all the kelp that's over my leash. And now I realize I'm in bad shape. So this next wave hits me and it rolls me over in the water, and now I'm like trying to figure out, because it's black, right? It's nighttime, it's dark. I'm trying to figure out which way is up. My board is being pulled under the water because all the kelp tentacles are pulling on my leash down. And then I'm again struggling, like, reaching through this stuff, and I get to the surface again just in time for the next wave to hit me. And then I really started to panic, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna die in 7 feet of water in a kelp forest, by this hotel in the ocean, only 50 or 60 feet from shore. And of course, that's the way the human mind, we go to the worst possible scenario. So luckily for me, a really big wave came after that one, and I was able to get on top of my board and face toward shore. And so I'm on my board facing toward shore. There's still tons of kelp on my leash, and this huge wave's behind me. It crashes on me, and luckily the power generated by the water rips me out of this little area and spits me up in a place where I can stand, right? And I come to the surface, and like, oh, thank God I didn't die, right? Can you imagine, like, my wife finding out, oh yeah, sorry, your husband died in 7 feet of water, 50 feet from shore, because he was an idiot swimming or surfing, in the dark, and he jumped off his board into a kelp forest that he couldn't see. So anyway, oftentimes, and you've probably had that situation yourself, maybe you're walking down a path and all of a sudden you see a bear or like a cougar or a deer, and all of a sudden the wild impinges on what you have considered to be safe and domestic the entire time. And so the wild can insert itself, right? And all of a sudden we're taken into this dangerous place when we thought just a few seconds before that everything was normal, everything was safe. Okay, anyway, all those stories are just supposed to demonstrate the theoretical components that we'll be thinking about this week. As you respond to the discussion forum, go beyond the minimum requirements, keep the discussions going. Don't consider that a space just to answer the questions that are in the prompt. Instead, use the prompt to motivate your own thought, to be creative, and to engage each other in a lively debate and conversation about these things. I look forward to working with you this week, and let's have a great week together.